Number one rule in photography is always expect the unexpected. The Leafs-Sabres game on Sunday night was a perfect example of this. For 50 minutes, the game was fairly uneventful. And then all hell broke loose. And when all hell breaks loose, we ride the Motordrive. In the game, we had an instance where all the players on the ice were fighting at the same time. It was like slap shot 4 out there. When something like that happens on the ice, we're shooting very Motordrive heavy. I'm shooting in the highest frame rate possible. On this camera, low shoots between 3 to 5 frames per second. High shoots about 10 to 12 frames per second. When you're shooting anything in the maximum Motordrive mode, you have to keep a couple things in mind. One thing, you're worried about hitting what we call the buffer. You hit the buffer when your camera cannot keep up to writing the images to the card. And what happens is your camera will stop taking pictures until it finishes writing these images to the card. To avoid this, I shoot in JPEG mode. The images are smaller than a RAW file, but they're less forgiving. If you make a mistake on a JPEG, you may not be able to fix that mistake in whatever RAW viewer you look at. Whereas a RAW is a lot more forgiving. You might be able to fix an underexposed file or a file where you've blown away the highlights. Another way to avoid hitting the buffer is to have a card with a fast write speed. A card that writes about 90 megabytes per second is ideal. And if your camera uses SD cards, this one here is class 10, and it writes about 93 megabytes per second. Another way to avoid hitting the buffer is use 2 cameras. You can flip back and forth between the cameras and get 2 different looks, and that way while you're shooting with one camera, the other camera is catching up on the writing. But if you're shooting with 2 cameras, make sure to synchronize the clocks inside the camera. And by doing that, when you import the images into whatever program you use to edit them, the images will show up in chronological order. Having my camera synchronized came in really handy the next day when we dissected what happened in that fight between the Leafs and the Sabres. We were able to establish the order of events that led to this fight that was highlighted by a goalie fight. And how often do goalies fight? It's the first one I've seen in 16 years. So if you're out there shooting an event that requires a lot of pictures in a short bursts of time, remember, have a card with fast write speed, shoot JPEG if you're comfortable with it, and ride that Motordrive.